Now for Global Business Updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abasi. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Refinery. Good morning, all our viewers. We kick off, we're still on analysts. It seems like they've picked up on what we've been talking about, which is how electric vehicles would fare under a Trump Vance administration. So essentially, Tesla stock fell 3.14% yesterday. Year to date, the stock is up by 0.03%. It's been negative, but then the recent rally we saw kind of helped it up, but now heading back down. So analysts are basically souring on it because yesterday, JD Vance, when he introduced himself to the American public, calling himself a workers' politician, even though he voted against worker-friendly bills that Biden put forward to Congress, said specifically the Green New Scam. He said it while he was on stage, referring to the Green New Deal and the effort to, move to renewable energy. So here is one such analyst. Please listen carefully to what this man says. This is Mark Spiegel. He is the founder of Stanfield Capital Management. I think it was on Yahoo Finance or so. Listen to what he had to say.
He is having trouble with the DOJ. It is unquestionable that a Trump-Vance administration is terrible for Tesla from a business standpoint. And the reason is Trump has said time and time again, as recently as last month, and it's literally in the Republican platform that he personally approved, that he wants to get rid of all EV mandates, the whole Green New Deal, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that means, Tesla doesn't have that much margin anymore in its cars. As a wild guess, maybe $3,000 net a car. If that $7,500 credit goes away, it's going to have to raise prices. And if it has to raise prices, it's going to sell fewer cars. Also, of course, approximately from the estimates I've read, 70% of the buyer base for electric cars are Democrats. And, it was one thing when he would say he was neutral in the race and occasionally tweet a few kind words about Trump. I mean, now he obviously outright endorsed him. He's reportedly giving a PAC for the campaign, like $45 million a month from now through the election. I can't imagine a single Democrat, or let's say very few of them, willing to buy a Tesla at this point. So he has completely alienated most of his buying base, and not just in the U.S. I mean, in Europe, I see stuff on Twitter from Europeans because, it's the same thing. The EV buying base in Europe are mostly, liberals, progressives, whatever the equivalent of Democrats are. They're not going to buy this car either. So, it's going to kill the business.
All right, Donald Trump, I think I heard Dr. Abasi mention this, granted an interview to Bloomberg Business Week. Some of the highlights, he said tariffs are smart, that they're a good idea. He also said that Taiwan should pay the U.S. to protect it from China. And this is at odds with JD Vance, because JD Vance, who doesn't want to protect Ukraine, wants to send more money to Taiwan to protect against China because he feels that China is America's biggest adversary. So if they were to be elected, it would be interesting to see how that plays out. But as we've already been said, I said this yesterday, the day before, Europe is nervous, NATO, particularly Ukraine, and also Asia has reason to be nervous as well. And then he also said he would allow Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, a man he attacked repeatedly while he was in his first term. He said he will allow him to serve out his term if he does the right thing. And we understand that Trump is against any rate cuts this particular year. And then we quickly go to Nigeria. You've already touched on this. The President Tinubu writing a letter to the Senate seeking that 6.2 trillion or so, 3 trillion or 6.1, 3 trillion for infrastructure development, another 3 trillion for what he calls recurrent expenditure. And this wanting to tax the banks. It's important to note, if we pull up, I couldn't go through all the financial statements of all the banks in Nigeria, but just looking at a select number of them, looking at if there should be a table in front of you with a select number of the FUGAs, which is, of course, First Bank, UBA, GT, Access, Zenith, and then the other some select tier 2 banks, they've already paid taxes in fiscal year 2023, right? It's to the tune of what, about 570 billion or so. You can see the figure there. So to say that you want to tax their foreign exchange gains, when you already told them, that's the CBN told the banks already, that you should not use your foreign exchange gains to pay dividends, it suggests that they already had this in mind. And, further, it also, it casts a shadow on the current recapitalization exercise that is going on. Because we have to get more details. We don't know what the extent of this extra tax is going to be on the banks. But it essentially means that they're probably targeting the same retained earnings that they said they shouldn't use as part of the recapitalization exercise. So you told them to do one thing, and now you're going back to go and tax them again. I was against them saying they shouldn't pay it out to dividends, because if a bank that I'm a shareholder in has enjoyed reevaluation gains, I should be getting dividends as a shareholder, or it goes to retained earnings. You can choose to do that with your profits after tax. And then another thing, I don't know, people in this country seem to think that banks in Nigeria are money spinners, and you only look at the profits that banks make. The Punch newspaper looked at, I think, 10 select banks in the country. Their operating expenses, it was 3.2 trillion, a 42% increase from 2022. It cost some banks still have reduced hours because of the rise in the cost of diesel, maintaining branches. So, we're getting a lot of pushback on this tax issue, and it's a one-time thing. So if some people who are speculating that it could be because of the minimum wage or whatever, it's one time. How do you now fund the minimum wage going forward? And finally, shout out to Esili Aigbe, the economist that was on yesterday. I love whenever he comes on the program. I love everything he says. I loved every single slide that he put on the show yesterday when he was breaking down the cost of fuel subsidies. You are looking for extra 6 trillion naira to fund infrastructure and fund recurrent expenditure, but you're still spending almost 24 trillion on fuel subsidies. I'm out of breath saying this. Remove the fuel subsidies and take the savings from there for whatever you want to use. That's our update for today.
24 trillion. That 24 is a cumulative amount. It's not that they are spending the 24 trillion. The money is way less than that. What I want to say is this, Rotus, as regards the banks. The truth is, obviously, you will agree with me, except you want to be sentimental, that government is now clueless. They need revenue, but they don't know how to get the revenue. So where do they look for? They look for banks. You didn't even talk about the effects of the sugar taxation on the beverage sector that's already struggling, over 100% increase due to subsidy removal in the electricity sector, that they can't even break even with the new minimum wage that they're about to be slapped on to pay. So when you look at all of that, it is obvious that this government is clueless. So what does Mr. Wale Edu always do? He just looks and says, who are we going to tax next? Okay, banks made some foreign revenue windfall. We'll tax them. They don't talk about the fact that the money has increased with the banks as regards how much they even have to pay for electricity and the cost of running the banks. Government never gives businesses anything in this country. All they do is to tax and tax and tax. Oh, probably they give you rice.
No, do I go to businesses or to individuals, the most vulnerable, in terms of people? Well, they go to the most vulnerable. But the truth is, just to, in terms of what you've talked about, you've said it consistently here, that you can't tax your way out of an economic crisis. If not, you further impoverish the people and further set businesses up for failure. This is something we've talked about a number of times. And so it cannot be this administration's options for shoring up revenue. I understand, because when you look at the heavy profits by those banks, the figures we pulled up earlier on, it is enticing enough to want to come in, swoop in and give a windfall tax. And to be fair, this year, the banks, against all odds, yes, they haven't had such favorable conditions for working, have been able to make a lot of profit. And so in order to perhaps, think of ways of bringing in money, let's tax the businesses, let's get their money. But like you said, very well said, Rufai, if the government were supporting or investing or at least helping or supporting businesses, then it would make sense for them to then, when it's time, tax those profits profits right there. But in terms of Tesla seems to have a myriad of challenges, and I think there's still more to come. It's not just the election of Trump, but look at the competition we've been talking about a number of times. A lot of things talk about. I don't know what the future holds for Tesla, especially with EV, and especially if they don't make their cars cheaper.
Okay, very quickly. Donald Trump granting an interview to Bloomberg yesterday, the major point that he made, and he's been consistent on that regard, is that, look, America is going to place tariffs of up to 60% on imports from China. And that second, Taiwan will have to pay for defense to the U.S., pointing to the same argument that is pushed about JD Vance and Trump about American exceptionalism, about American isolationism under a Trump presidency. Now, the markets reacted immediately. The stock price of NVIDIA went down, of TSMC, that's the Taiwan semiconductor company, went down. And so there's some anxiety in the market now about, the possibility of a Trump presidency. As it is in other parts of the world, so it is also in Europe, where we seem to be having a combination of anti-globalists likely to win the election. So the second point is about NNPC Limited in Nigeria. Are you aware that yesterday some youths in Port Harcourt went and attacked the Port Harcourt Refinery that we have been told is technically completed? In fact, the story is that they vandalized that Port Harcourt Refinery. We have been talking about, 2 million target at the end of this year, the group CEO of NNPC Limited promising us. So the problem with Nigeria is not just government. The problem is also the people. Host communities, I don't know how they are going to address it, but they went and vandalized Port Harcourt Refinery so that when we don't meet the target that Mele Kyari has promised us, we will also, on this table, have a duty to blame the host community for vandalizing national assets, for vandalizing something that is important to Nigeria's economic stability. I don't know whether you saw the story, but it's out there.